It's my custom to usually start every class at 11 minutes past the hour. And I usually like to invite people into the space by giving them something to listen to while we're inviting people in, while you're grabbing your coffee or your tea or whatever is going to help you get through. I'm staying heavily caffeinated. I got 6 shots of espresso in this bad boy. So we're going to be listening to just a few minutes of Malcolm's 1964 Ballot of the Bullet speech as we're waiting for folks to filter into the room. So make yourselves comfortable. We're going to start at 11 minutes past the hour with the actual content. Service, if you don't mind just giving us a few minutes from Malcolm's Ballot of the Bullet speech, I'm going to just get situated here, and we'll start in about 7 minutes.
Slavery. How are you going to tell me you're a second-class citizen? They don't have second-class citizenship in any other government on this earth. They just have slaves and people who are free. Well, this country is a hypocrite. They try and make you think they set you free by calling you a second-class citizen. No, you're nothing but a 20th century slave. Just as it took nationalism to remove colonialism from Asia and Africa, it'll take black nationalism today to remove colonialism from the backs and the minds of 22 million Afro-Americans here in this country. And 1964 looks like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet.
This wearable flashlight glove is quickly becoming the most popular Christmas gift of 2025.
Why does it look like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet? Because Negroes have listened to the trickery and the lies and the false promises of the white man now for too long. And they're fed up. They've become disenchanted. They've become disillusioned. They've become dissatisfied. And all of this has built up frustrations in the black community that makes the black community throughout America today more explosive than all of the atomic bombs the Russians can ever invent. Whenever you got a racial powder keg sitting in your lap, you're in more trouble than if you had an atomic powder keg sitting in your lap. When a racial powder keg goes off, it doesn't care who it knocks out the way. Understand this, it's dangerous. And in 1964, this seems to be the year. Because what can the white man use now to fool us? After he put down that march on Washington, and you see all through that now, he tricked you, had you marching down to Washington. Yes, had you marching back and forth between the feet of a dead man named Lincoln and another dead man named George Washington, singing "We Shall Overcome." He made a chump out of you. He made a fool out of you. He made you think you were going somewhere, and you end up going nowhere but between Lincoln and Washington. So today our people are disillusioned. They've become disenchanted. They've become dissatisfied. And in their frustrations they want action. You'll see this young black man, this new generation, asking for the ballot or the bullet. That old Uncle Tom action is outdated. The young generation don't want to hear anything about the odds are against us. What do we care about odds? When this country here was first being founded, there were 13 colonies. The whites were colonized. They were fed up with this taxation without representation. So some of them stood up and said, liberty or death. Though I went to a white school over here in Mason, Michigan, the white man made the mistake of letting me read his history books. He made the mistake of teaching me that Patrick Henry was a patriot and George Washington wasn't nothing nonviolent about old Pat or George Washington. Liberty or death was what brought about the freedom of whites in this country from the English. They didn't didn't care about the arts, why, they faced the wrath of the entire British Empire. And in those days, they used to say that the British Empire was so vast and so powerful when the sun would never set on it. This is how big it was. Yet these 13 little scrawny states, tired of taxation without representation, tired of being exploited and oppressed and degraded, told that big British Empire, liberty or death. And here you have 22 million Afro-Americans, black people today, catching more hell than Patrick Henry ever saw. And I'm here to tell you, in case you don't know it, that you got a new generation of black people in this country who don't care anything whatsoever about ours. They don't want to hear you, old Uncle Tom, handkerchief heads, talking about the ours. No. This is a new generation. If they're going to draft these young black men and send them over to Korea or South Vietnam to face 800 million Chinese, if you're not afraid of those odds, you shouldn't be afraid of these odds. Why does this loom to be such an explosive political year? Because this is the year.
All right. Greetings and welcome. Nothing like a little Malcolm to get you warmed up, to get the juices flowing and ready for conversation. So at 11:11, we get this started. So first of all, if you're new to the space, welcome to the space. If you're coming back to the space, welcome back to the space. Whenever possible, we're going to try to create a kind of virtual community gathering. So if you're in a position where you can put your camera on so that folks can see who you are, get some, read facial cues and so forth, build community, all the better. And I fully understand that people are joining this while they are cooking and taking care of children and doing other things. And if you're not in a position to have your camera on, no harm, no foul, but whenever you are, do be in community with your folks. The second thing that I'm just going to say also, just a quick roadmap. This is two things happening at the same time. This is an effort to unpack some important kind of historical precedents and to develop some intellectual tools for thinking through the electoral politics of liberation. But most importantly, this is a political build. This is a practical application of knowledge that we are trying to seek out. We're not just doing this for academic purposes. We're doing this because we are living in a contemporary moment where all of our rights, civil liberties, economic opportunities, basic human dignities are under direct threat and assault by precisely the same forces that Malcolm was addressing in 1964. So this build, this space that we're in, is going to be designed to try to critically engage with the past in order to take effective action in the present, because this fight is ongoing. And we're going to be starting with Malcolm's Ballot of the Bullet speech. But if you read the description for the seminar, the Ballot of the Bullet is the starting point. The overall idea is to understand Black liberation traditions, engagement with electoral politics more broadly. So Malcolm is going to be our principal interlocutor. He's the person that's going to bring us into this conversation. But we're also going to be engaging with Fanny Lou Hamer. We're also going to be engaging with the Black Panther Party. We're also going to be engaging with Kwame Ture. We're going to be engaging with Fred Hampton, Assata Shakur. We're going to be engaging with the Black liberation tradition more broadly, and the way that the Black liberation tradition has given us specific concrete principles and practices on how to engage with electoral politics as part of an overall liberation strategy. Make sense? Okay, and if you've been in this space with me before, the way that I like to normally do things. So first of all, It's always going to be like a dialogic space, a space of conversation. I was raised in an African American rhetorical tradition that is built on call and response. We're not going to spend the next 2 hours with me just lecturing and giving content material. The way that I usually like to do things is to start with a kind of initial exposition around a topic that gets us into conversation, but I might call for, responses, or I might ask questions of y'all as we're doing that initial build. After usually about somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour in, we kind of take like just a little bit of a break to decompress and to assess, and then I take questions directly. So if there's kind of substantive questions that need like a longer answer that might derail the narrative that we're building about how to understand from the past, make notes of those. You're going to get plenty of opportunity. Almost always the last 45 minutes or so of these conversations, exactly. I see Derek got the notepad ready to go. The last 45 minutes of these are usually dialogic, more explicitly, like built on really answering y'all's questions directly, and trying to bring the maximum benefit out of the space through our interaction. So without any further ado, I'm going to set the stage for the first part of the conversation. And again, dialogically, how many of y'all have had the opportunity to either listen to or read Malcolm's Ballot of the Bullet speech? Okay, so homework assignment number one is it should already be in the chat, and I'll ask our admin to copy it back into the chat so that folks can see it. What you guys were listening to on the way into the space was the audio recording of Malcolm's 1964 Ballot of the Bullet speech that he delivered in Detroit on April 12th, 1964. There are at least two that we know of iterations of this speech. There was another one that he gave on April 3rd, 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio. There's a full transcript of that one. I'm also going to add that to the course email so that you guys will get access to the text of that as well. Your homework assignment for tonight is to listen to the entirety of that Ballot of the Bullet speech. It's about 52 minutes long. You can play it at 1.5 speed, 1.25 speed, just so that you can start to kind of get into the rhetorical space and the epistemological space that Malcolm is operating in. So that's something that we're gonna need going into tomorrow's class. But for a short introduction, the Ballot of the Bullet speech, its rhetoric is operating at 3 fundamental levels. Malcolm is referring to the ballot or the bullet in 3 basic ways. And in order to unpack those directly, I just want to use about 2.5 minutes from the Cleveland version of that speech. I want you guys to watch this with me, and then we are going to take it apart together. So I'm going to pull this one up. Here we go. Make sure I'm sharing sound. Is everybody able to, let's see that screen? Let me go to full screen for it. Got it? I seem to have frozen up for a moment. Do you guys have me?
I have to look at this and understand this, that the ballot is as powerful as the bullet. Now, if you and I leave it up to the moderate Negro leaders, they'll be able to trick it up and make the world think that they passed something that doesn't really mean anything. So what you and I have got to do is get involved. You and I have to be right there breathing down their throat. Every time they look over their shoulder, we want them to see us. We want to make them pass the strongest civil rights bill they've ever passed. Because we know even after they pass it, they can't enforce it. In order to do this, we're starting a voters registration drive. We have to get everybody in Harlem registered, not as Democrats or Republicans, but registered as independents. We're going to organize a corps of brothers and sisters who, after the city is mapped out, they won't leave one apartment house door not knocked on. There won't be a door in Harlem that will not have been knocked on, to see that whatever black face lives behind that door is registered to vote by a certain time this year. Nobody will have an excuse not to be registered. We'll ask him, let us see your card. If you don't have the sense of responsibility to get registered, we'll move you out of town. It's going to be the ballot or the bullet.
All right. So what did y'all hear in those 2 minutes about the core rhetoric? What does Malcolm mean when he says the ballot or the bullet? It's operating at multiple levels. Sorry, I'm doing the university professor thing. This is where I'm going to wait y'all out until somebody raises their hand and comes into the conversation. Yeah, Sarah, go ahead and unmute.
It means that we have to get out there and knock on people's doors and get them to register. And when I picture that, it's not exactly like I could imagine myself threatening to run them out of town. And I live right in the middle of MAGA country. And so to me, it seems like a huge challenge. And but you have to wake people up. And that's part of this whole operation.
All right, excellent. So you hone right in on that last usage of the ballot or the bullet, which is not usually how Malcolm's speech is understood. So the first rhetorical level that this speech is usually taken at is that it is an ultimatum to white America, an ultimatum to the oppressive power structures. You will see this repeated in the audio from Detroit on April 12th. You will see it come up again also in the textual transcript of the Cleveland speech. The idea at the first level is simple and straightforward. We are going to have our freedom, and you can do this either the easy way or the hard way, right? America, which way do you want to do this? And this is codified and summed up in a statement that's not from a Black revolutionary, that comes from a white liberal. But John F. Kennedy said, "Whoever makes peaceful revolution impossible makes violent revolution inevitable." And that's the first level to understand the ballot or the bullet, is that the ballot or the bullet in its overall rhetorical structure, and we should be thinking about how to mirror the effective rhetorical structures that made people like Malcolm such effective leaders, organizers, and mobilizers. So just understand that this is the first piece. And we are going to get free. And you can do this either the easy way or the hard way. And then that's rooted in a second predicate, was the very first thing that I had you guys listen to from Malcolm. He said, you and I have to understand this, that the ballot is every bit as powerful as the bullet. And this is a really, really crucial and critical argument, especially in today's contemporary leftist spaces and organizing spaces, where there is a great deal of skepticism about the efficacy of electoral political interventions as ways to bring about revolutionary change. Whoever you're listening to in online leftist spaces that's saying that electoral politics don't matter, or electoral politics are not revolutionary, electoral politics are just a kind of bourgeois fiction, or they're playing into the system, whoever that person is that is saying that is not more radical than Malcolm is. Right? Whoever's saying that is not more radical than Malcolm is. Malcolm is as radical and revolutionary in his overall approach to American politics as one can conceivably be. And the other folks that we're going to talk about, like the Black Panthers, who, as I'll show in a few minutes, explicitly saw themselves as farming in a field that Malcolm cleared. The Panthers, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, said that this movement, we do not claim that we did what Malcolm would have done, but the spirit of Malcolm was with us and it was animating us. That their idea in developing the ideologies and the political practices of the Black Panther Party were an effort to fulfill the political mission that Malcolm laid down before he was assassinated in '65. And the Panthers, including Huey P. Newton himself, ran for elected office. Huey ran for Congress not once, but twice. Bobby Seale ran for Oakland, for mayor of Oakland in 1973. The Panthers were actually incredibly effective in intervening in multiple levels of electoral politics in Oakland and in other places. So the first two pieces are functioning together to bring about the third point, which is where Sarah started us, which is, what does Malcolm say? He says, we're going to knock on every door in Harlem, and we're going to register every Black face behind every door, not as a Democrat, not as a Republican. We're going to come back to that in a minute. That's obviously really, really critical to the political analysis that Malcolm is engaging in, and that all of the other exponents of the Black liberation tradition are going to engage in. They are not going to draw a fundamental distinction between the way that Democrats and Republicans move. They're going to identify them as a single political entity that needs to be subverted and attacked. So there is no playing, blue versus red for any of these Black radicals or revolutionaries. But it's Malcolm goes further than this, and this is the point where Sarah started us, which is a difficult thing perhaps for some of us to picture. But Malcolm said, we are going to say, show us your card, and if you don't have the responsibility to get yourself registered, then we might just move you out of town. It's going to be the ballot or the bullet. And that is quite a different register that Malcolm is operating at when he talks about the urgency and the imperative nature of engaging the electoral political sphere, which should cause you to understand immediately that anybody that's telling you to disregard electoral politics as a significant component of the way that we get ourselves free is directly arguing against Malcolm. They're directly arguing against the Panthers. They're directly arguing against Kwame Ture. They're directly arguing against Fanny Lou Hamer. Is that these were people that understood that electoral politics by themselves are incapable of delivering true liberation, but that in a democratic society, liberation cannot be struggled for meaningfully without engaging the electoral political institutions in the society, because that is one of the mechanisms through which people can do two things. One, organize community power, and two, directly contest for control over the machinery of power itself. More on this in just a second. I want to bring another interlocutor into the conversation. Sorry about that. Every time I try to share, I get just a little bit of a freeze. I'm going to try this one more time, and hopefully this works a little better. Okay. Everybody seeing this? Perfect. Um, so some of you may recognize this particular slide. This is from one of the first intensives that we did of this kind. This one was called Panther Power. I think we probably did this one maybe back in July. And I want to make sure that I provide links to the video recordings. Maybe we service, if we can drop those into the chat. Um, if we can drop those into the chat, I want to provide links to the previous courses, especially to the Panther Power course that we did. And then also we did one on Frantz Fanon and revolutionary psychology, and we're going to refer back to a couple of those pieces in tomorrow's session as well. I wanted to take us now from the initial framing with Malcolm, and we're going to come back to the initial framing from Malcolm in just a moment, to bring us into the Panthers and the particular approach that the Panthers took to electoral politics and the way that they connected it with Malcolm's overall political vision. So first, from Huey P Newton, Revolutionary Suicide. Revolution is not an action, it is a process. Times change and the policies of the past are not necessarily effective in the present. Our military strategies were not frozen. As conditions changed, so did our tactics. Before I go any further, this is incredibly important point to underline and to highlight, because it's also baked into the methodology of this particular seminar and to the overall political movement that we're trying to build. We are meant to draw lessons and inspiration from the past. We are not making an effort to do a cookie cutter cut and paste of the solutions that were offered in a previous historical moment and to try to plant them down in this one. History, as Malcolm put it, he said, of all of the fields of study, history is most likely to reward our research. Malcolm believed, as I believe, firmly in the importance of studying history. But the study of history is not meant so that you can try to directly mimic, but rather to understand the principles that are motivating successful action, that are guiding successful action in a moment, and then engage in a process of active and reflection and practical engagement on your contemporary circumstances so that you undertake the action that produces the result. It means that you're trying to learn from both the successes and the failures of previous movements, and then you're applying them to the circumstances as you are able to, because Malcolm did not see 2025. Huey P Newton did not see 2025. So being grounded in the principles of their resistance struggles and of their liberation principles does not remove for us the moral and intellectual obligation of striving to understand our direct and immediate political circumstances and engaging and acting in this moment, because this moment hasn't yet existed. Back to Huey. Patrolling the community was only one step in our 10-point program. As a matter of fact, the right to bear arms for protection appeared near the end of our program as point 7 and came only after those demands we considered far more urgent: freedom, employment, education, and housing. The short version of what I want to bring into the conversation in this moment from Huey P and from the Panthers is that, as I just cited, they were interested in engaging in electoral politics. But the principal instructive lessons that I take from the Panther tradition and that we worked on over a weekend seminar called Panther Power was on the significance of centering mutual aid in our movement activities. What Huey P just said on page 356 of Revolutionary Suicide, which he penned, I think, in 1973. He said basically everybody was fascinated by the image of black men in leather jackets with guns. And that became the first thing that people thought about when they thought about the Panthers. They thought about armed black men following the police, and they thought about self-defense. And we are going to come back to self-defense because this is actually a critical part of the way that we need to understand how we move in this current moment. But what Huey P was saying on that particular page was self-defense was point 7 in the Black Panther Party's 10-point platform. The first 6 pieces of that 10-point platform were all what they came to call survival programs. And these were programs that were about serving the community and meeting basic community needs. The reason why I had hot breakfast before school at a public school in Washington, D.C. in the late 1970s was because the Panthers gave it to Black kids in Oakland at the end of the 1960s. It was because the Panthers got hot breakfast to Black kids in Chicago and Detroit in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And it put so much pressure on state and federal governments because they were fearful of the political indoctrination and the goodwill, solidarity, and community building that radical revolutionary organizing units like the Panthers were building through meeting basic needs that the state wouldn't meet. So it literally led to a direct response of bringing in those hot breakfast programs. The Panthers operated 9 free medical clinics in 19 different US cities in the late 1960s and into the 1970s, entirely free medical clinics. And they made a simple, straightforward, anti-capitalist argument that healthcare cannot be a for-profit industry if you are going to take care of the basic needs of communities. So the reason why I'm raising this now is that in my understanding, and I hope that this can become a matter of substantive conversation in the second half of today's session, is that the basic model that the Panthers created was a revolutionary cocktail that brought together mutual aid in the first instance, community care, right? Direct action as its second pillar. And then in third place, electoral politics. Mutual aid, direct action, electoral politics. Mutual aid, direct action, electoral politics. Wash, rinse, repeat. Over and over again, they created iterations of this basic structure. And if you want to understand how even though I'm running for elected office in the state of California and ran for national office of vice president in 2024, the principal distinction that exists in my own head between what we are trying to do as a political movement and what other electoral political movements are trying to achieve is that I have no illusions that we will be able to achieve our collective liberation goals by voting our way to power. Voting and electoral politics play an important role in it, and we're going to dig deeper into it in a minute. But the overall understanding is that mutual aid, direct action, and electoral politics will get us to liberation, because that is the model that the Panthers utilize. It's also the model that you'll see that Kwame Ture with the All African People's Revolutionary Party engaged with, the recently deceased. And, as a practicing Muslim and as a practicing, Black radical, I'm going to just say a prayer for Imam Jamil El-Amin, formerly H. Rap Brown, who died at age 82 in custody after being denied cancer treatment. A great Muslim like Malcolm, a great radical like Malcolm. But Imam Jamil was similarly one of those people who he literally said, he said, one, there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans. He said that they're both capitalist, imperialist, and white supremacist parties. And then he said, and I don't believe that we can just vote our way to freedom. But then he said, but I understand that the vote is a critical tool in organizing my people. And if you forget everything else that comes out of these 2 days, reflect on how we can utilize electoral politics as a tool for organizing our people, as a tool to help us strengthen those efforts at mutual aid, of building strong communities that are capable of resisting imperialism, that are capable of providing basic care and meeting the needs of all of the people that empire is currently crushing, as a way of using electoral political tools to strengthen the way that we engage direct action. Because if I had the power, the media apparatus, for example, that Team Blue has, that the Democrats have, you could absolutely shut this country down yesterday with a general strike. Yesterday. With access to a tiny fraction of the resources that are at their disposal, if they were in any way directed towards liberation or movement ends, all of the resources are already present. And by the way, this was also there in the piece that Malcolm was that I had you guys listening to on the way in. Maybe some people came in late, but what people were listening to as we came into the room, one of the things that Malcolm said, and he's speaking in 64. He said they really fooled you good with that 63 March on Washington, didn't they? He said they had you marching back and forth between the foot of one dead white man and another dead white man. He said they had you marching back and forth between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, thinking that you were going someplace. Now, why am I raising this? Because we just had No Kings protests across this country where people are marching back and forth, right? Not going anywhere. Because there is no coordination or intentional strategy to relate the electoral political interventions with direct action, with community care, mutual aid, and community building. So part of the reason why I wanted you to hear Malcolm going off, I mean, first of all, he got you walking back and forth between the foot of one dead white man and the foot of another. Like Malcolm was just built different, you know, like he always had these references, you know, just right there to really crystallize things for you. But we are in a similar moment where a kind of performative politics of especially the Democrats and especially the liberal establishment is actually very, very clearly disempowering communities. And when you flip the equation and just imagine what we could achieve with an integrated approach that brought together, as the Panthers imagined it, mutual aid, direct action, and electoral politics, then you start to understand how dangerous we actually can be to establish political authority. Because it does not, in point of fact, take massive numbers in order to bring about fundamental critical change when those pieces are working in concert. One more piece tying the Panthers and Malcolm together. But first, let me give you the direct quotes from the Panthers about the relationship between these visions. So here's Huey P. Bobby Seale had collected all of Malcolm's speeches and ideas from papers like The Militant and Muhammad Speaks. These we studied carefully. Although Malcolm's program for the organization of Afro-American unity was never put into operation, he made it clear that Blacks ought to arm. Malcolm's influence was ever present. We continue to believe that the Black Panther Party exists in the spirit of Malcolm. Again, we'll come back to self-defense in just a moment. Actually, let's take self-defense and then we'll move to the second point. Malcolm advocated for self-defense. He did not consider self-defense to be violence. Malcolm said self-defense is not violence, it is intelligence. The broader Black liberation tradition in which Malcolm was embedded, people like Walter Rodney, the great Guyanese historian and activist, he was one of the first professionally trained PhDs in African history, and he died doing socialist organizing work in his homeland of Guyana. Walter Rodney said, by what scale of morality can you compare armed resistance of the oppressed to the violence of oppression against them? There is no moral equivalence that is possible between taking up arms to defend yourself against oppressive structures and the violence that is imposed upon communities. One of those things is violence, and the other one is self-defense. One of those things is violence. The other of those things is intelligence. One of those things is an absolute and fundamental moral wrong. The absolute and fundamental moral wrong is using force to take lives, property, land, dignity, honor. Many of us are home relaxing on this Thanksgiving weekend, which is a fake holiday designed to normalize and institutionalize genocide and manifest destiny. And there is no scale of morality wherein the armed resistance of indigenous peoples to the never-ending slaughter and theft of settler colonialists can ever be framed in the same discourse at all. One of those things is an absolute and objective moral wrong, and one of the most heinous crimes that a human being can commit upon another human being. Hitting somebody over the head and taking their stuff, violating them in every conceivable way, right up to and including sexual violence on an insane, unimaginable scale, kidnapping of children, putting them in indigenous boarding schools. What kinds of schools have graveyards on the school sites? Those are not schools at all. Those are concentration camps. So in what scale of morality can you compare whatever means the colonized and oppressed might reach for in order to get that knee off of their own necks? When I was asked in an interview on Middle East Eye what Malcolm might have said about the events that unfolded post October 7th, I said, I don't know. I don't want to put words in Malcolm's mouth, but I do know one thing. I know how he would have answered the question, do you condemn Hamas? I know I would answer that question. Because Malcolm had already said that when he was asked about the atrocities committed by the Mau Mau in trying to struggle for liberation in Kenya, he said that that's not violence. He said it's not violence. We don't call it violence. We call it intelligence when you take up arms to defend yourself against oppressors and occupiers. And this is an absolutely crucial point, is that the Black liberation tradition has been absolutely unanimous and unambiguous on this point, even down to the so-called nonviolent portions of the so-called civil rights movement. Stokely Carmichael, who we'll talk about in just a moment, later changes his name to Kwame Ture, explained that when the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee went down to Mississippi to get folks registered in 1964, they were armed at all times. For self-defense. Even though they were engaged in a nonviolent form of direct action that did not obviate the basic moral responsibility upon them to provide protection for the people that were in their care. Fanny Lou Hamer, who was similarly voting registration activist and champion, in that very same movement, that same Freedom Summer of 1964, where Malcolm's speech is taking place a few months before this. Despite the fact that they were, again, organizing for nonviolent direct action, not protest, nonviolent direct action. Fanny Lou Hamer said, I don't worry about the Klan because any white boy wants to burn a cross on my lawn. I keep a loaded shotgun in every room and he ain't gonna write his mama ever again. And the last thing that I'll say on this particular point, because this is really, really crucial, is that Malcolm's overall argument, and by the way, Malcolm was never involved or in any way in any kind of armed exchange at any point in the movement, but he was unequivocal about your basic, not just your moral right, but your moral responsibility to provide for the safety of your communities. He said, if you live inside a state that is not only not going to protect you against racist violence, and understand that ICE kidnappings is racist violence. If you are in a state that is not going to protect you against racist violence, and moreover, not only will it not protect you, but it will facilitate and actively engage in violence against you, then it is your moral responsibility to provide for your own defense. So what I said in that Middle East Eye interview is I said that while I don't know what Malcolm would have said, I know how he would have answered the question, do you condemn Hamas? And quite apart, or perhaps in addition to what Malcolm might have said, here's what I say. What I say is that occupied and colonized people do not simply have a right to resistance. That is something that is enshrined in international law. It's the reason why whenever you hear people say Israel has a right to defend itself, you understand that they are intentionally gaslighting you, because they know full well that an occupying power does not have a right to defend itself against the people that it occupies. It actually has a mandate of care for that occupied population, and the occupied population has the right up to and including armed resistance against their occupiers. So they're lying right through their whole face. It's not just that colonized and occupied people have a right to resistance. Colonized and occupied people have a moral obligation of resistance, up to and including armed self-defense. So for those of you that might be recovering liberals, understand that the discourse about a kind of inherent moral superiority of nonviolence. Nonviolence is always preferred in every circumstances, but in every circumstance, but nonviolence is not always available as an option, and you do not. There is no moral. Recovering Liberals Anonymous. Sorry, I just saw that in the chat. I mean, that's a. It is a moral responsibility. Does that mean that everybody, needs to be walking around carrying that thing on them? No, it does not. But what it does mean is that as a community, we need to have conversations about how to ensure our security and self-defense. And this is incredibly important in this contemporary moment where the discourse from the Liberal Party is still going to be in a very, very narrow way moralizing about nonviolence, not a very, very particular kind of nonviolence, in the face of escalating direct forms of violence. Somebody put this on the internet at one point, and I really, really liked it. If you go far enough left, you get your guns back. And that works for white people. Black folks were never giving up them guns because it just was not. It was not safe. King carried around either a 22 or a 38. Right. So just understand that providing the basic elements of self-defense is crucial. And I'll connect that to the broader point, which goes back to the Ballot or the Bullet speech. Malcolm, in the pieces that you guys were listening to on the way into the classroom today, directly related the situation of the oppressed Black community to colonized communities abroad. He kept referring to the colonized situation of the so-called American Negro or the African or the Black man, depending on which lingo he's using. He's in this period in '64 where he is now free from the Nation of Islam, and he's distancing itself from some of their rhetorical categories. And he says, I think it's in the Detroit version of the speech, he said, we don't refer to ourselves as so-called Negroes anymore. He said, because that's a negative category. It tells you what you are not. It doesn't tell you who you are, right? So Malcolm was very much entering a Black nationalist phase in his thinking, and he's identifying as African or Black and trying to create rhetorical categories in that way. And as he's thinking his way outside of the nativist box of the Nation of Islam, which always understood the problem of the so-called Negro as a problem inside the United States, Malcolm is now utilizing analytical tools that are drawn from broader anti-imperial freedom struggles, which is why he's connecting with Mau Mau, which is why he's connecting with the Vietnamese people, which is why he is starting to understand the circumstances of, yes, first the Black community, but eventually oppressed communities more broadly inside the United States of America as being victims of internal colonialism. He is putting the two pieces together, and this has to be absolutely fundamental to our politics in this moment, because it is fundamental to the politics of Malcolm, who never identifies himself as a socialist. Malcolm says, I'm a Muslim and a revolutionary. Now, he never identifies himself as a capitalist. He's decidedly not that. The Panthers are explicitly Marxist-Leninist in their orientation. Kwame Ture, similarly socialist in his orientation. But across ideological divides, there is always a direct understanding of the relationship between imperialism abroad and oppression in the imperial core. And this is a critical piece that made the movements of the late 1960s, especially Malcolm and especially the Panthers, so dangerous to the established political structure, so dangerous to the duopoly, to the Democrats, to the Republicans, is that they allowed for a single organic critique of the never-ending war machine that was expressed in the Korean War and in the Vietnam War, and the oppression of marginalized communities in the imperial center. And this was drawing on the fact that these Black nationalists were now explicitly internationalists in their scope and engaging with Black liberation thinkers that were in other places. They were drawing principally and explicitly. Huey P. Newton talks about this. In addition to reading all of Malcolm's things, they read Frantz Fanon. They read Wretched of the Earth. They read Black Skins, White Masks. And this helped to crystallize that international dimension and to make an organic connection in all of their political education opportunities, including a simple speech in a Detroit church or a simple speech in a Cleveland church, is that you're always going to make those connections for people. Make it clear to them that there is a direct organic interrelationship between Palestinian liberation. I don't even know if you can see that with all that sunlight coming in. We got the I Love Palestine mug, right? That there's a direct relationship between the way that the empire subdues and subjugates its enemies abroad, the way that it utilizes American militarism for resource extraction and resource exploitation in far-flung places, and the way that that state similarly represses and diminishes the rights of oppressed communities in the imperial core. This is summarized in a simple term: Imperial Boomerang. Imperial Boomerang is a concept that is first developed by a Black Caribbean intellectual, Aimé Césaire. And Aimé Césaire is a close friend and mentor of Frantz Fanon, and another Black Caribbean Francophone intellectual. And Fanon is the person who is going to make this argument most effectively, and he's going to make it widespread through those works that I referenced earlier. But Césaire is the first person to author it. He says that what they call fascism is just what happened when Europeans began doing to one another what they had been doing to the colonial world the whole while. It's when the instruments that are utilized to oppress colonial populations in far-flung tropical locations then come to be utilized as mechanisms of control inside the imperial core. Malcolm had another way of saying it. It was a simple way, as Malcolm often did. It is chickens coming home to roost. It is the violence that you sow abroad eventually boomerangs back at you. It comes back and lands directly. So this is another piece that's crucially connecting the Black liberation tradition in this foundational period, is an always explicit direct connection between imperialism abroad and racist oppression inside the imperial core. And utilizing the tools of anti-colonial analysis and decolonial analysis inside the imperial core, it helps shatter American exceptionalism and helps to create solidarity and relationship between the global South and oppressed communities in the imperial core. And we are going to need every last one of those solidarities if we are going to get free. Somebody put it in the chat, what we saw 2 days ago. You mean the shooting of 2 National Guards by the guy who was working for CIA? I literally just put that in the comments section on somebody's social media post. Chickens coming home to roost. Huey P. Newton put it in these terms. He said of the police, he said, police occupy our neighborhoods the way that troops occupy foreign territory. He said they can't possibly be there to protect our rights because they're the ones violating our rights. He said they can't possibly be there to protect our property because we don't own any property. Right? So Huey's understanding was that as soon as you start to understand the police as the occupying army that is being deployed against the internally colonized, then you are at the core of understanding the relationship between imperialism abroad and fascism at home. And now, if you zoom out from 1964 to 2025, you realize that the tools that the Black liberation tradition was evolving in order to understand the circumstances of the oppression of this specific community were precocious, because those precise tools are now being used to oppress not just Black folks, not just Latinos, not just queer folks, but every single person that can be brought under the domination of capitalist, imperialist, white supremacist empire. This is now the fundamental dynamics and the analyses that are being utilized by these Black liberation giants obtain across the board. And that is also the piece that made them so dangerous, is that they were articulating this in real time. When Malcolm is out of the nation, he is no longer beholden to an ideology where the white people are the devils. Malcolm is now saying we are seeking working class solidarity. He said we're understanding that Latinos in South America are being oppressed in the same way that Black people are being oppressed here. Huey P. Newton, and especially, so first of all, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale were incredibly gifted in engaging non-Black people in Marxist political organizing, political education, and political principles. Fred Hampton was fundamental in the creation of the Young Patriots and the Young Lords, bringing in a Puerto Rican organization and a white Appalachian organization to formulate that first Rainbow Coalition before that was co-opted. That is when these people became the most dangerous men on the planet, because they were directly challenging both the external face of American white supremacist empire and its internal face. And that's when Malcolm was assassinated in 65. That's when Fred Hampton was assassinated in 1969. Say a prayer for your brother whenever you get a chance. And if you're not saying prayers, send good vibes and energy, because if we keep building this, we are going to become precisely that kind of threat to white supremacist empire. Last piece, and then we'll start with questions. Are you guys able to see that or not yet? Just give me a thumbs up or, okay, perfect. Huey said in Revolutionary Suicide on page 70, he said, "I also saw the link between racism and the economics of capitalism. Although, despite the link, I recognized that it was necessary to separate the concepts in analyzing the general situation. In psychological terms, racism could continue to exist even after the economic problems that had created racism had been resolved. Never convinced that destroying capitalism would automatically destroy racism, I felt, however, that we could not destroy racism without wiping out its economic foundation. It was necessary to think much more creatively and independently about these complex interconnections." What did Huey P just say? I should leave it up on the screen. Starting to bring you in because I know I've been lecturing at you guys for a good 40 minutes now. We're about to go to the Q&A component, but I want you guys to give me the gist of the argument. Of course, the chat function is not working. Capitalism breeds racism. Yes, Alice, but there's more there still. Go ahead.
So what I'm hearing there is a connection that we're recognizing that racism and capitalism both function together. They're interconnected here, but that to address racism without addressing capitalism would be kind of unfruitful. Recognizing that we can't just eliminate the economic system where it requires racism to exist and then hope that racism would just magically disappear. That's not going to happen. They operate in a disconnect, but that still means that you have to get rid of what that catalyst is, the thing that requires racism and all of the other hierarchies that we have in order to even start addressing those things like racism, sexism, ableism, et cetera, because it's kind of the foundation of it. And once you address that, then the other ones we can then focus on. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
No, I can't think of a better way of putting it. So this is part of the purpose of studying history. It's the reason why I spent 10 weeks on this, in my, Black Revolutionaries course here at UCSB. Capitalism and racism emerged together, fully conjoined. And the reason is that capitalism needs to produce race in order to make both empire and capitalism work. That it actually has to produce racialized distinctions in order to put certain people in expendable labor categories and to exploit their labor in very, very particular ways. One of my teachers said it this way: the next time that capitalism the next time that we have a non-racial capitalism will be the first time that we've ever had non-racial capitalism, because capitalism has to produce race. It does not have another way of doing things. It actually has to produce these distinctions. So if in order to fundamentally solve the problem of racism, you have to simultaneously be at war with capitalism. But Huey is also adding, as you pointed out, that there is not that just solving the one will not create the other problem. And this is crucial for getting over two fundamental issues that often arise in Marxist circles. Huey is saying, first of all, that you need to be able to think independently and creatively with Marxist tools. You need to be able to utilize the terms of analysis, but also understand that Karl Marx was not going to be an authority on the Black experience or racialized thinking. That's just not that, right? It's the reason why reading Walter Rodney and Kwame Nkrumah and Frantz Fanon and Aimé Césaire and third world Black Marxists who are interpreting Marx and have the audacity to agree with him in substance and in analytical form, but to argue against Marx on specific points is crucial. And what Huey P is saying in this instance, he said, to me, it seemed pretty obvious that racism had come to take on a life of its own, so that even if you got rid of capitalism, you are still going to be left with racism. And frankly, this is something that a lot of white leftists cannot absorb and will lean on a Marxian analysis in order to bypass doing the work of attacking white supremacy and racism in their own thinking, in their own epistemology, and in the ways that they move in the world. Which means that even though we understand that there's a fundamental interrelationship between these, and one is the original cause, and by the way, as a historian of Africa and of race thinking, like it's very, very clear, what becomes European racist white supremacy emerges very clearly as a secondary effect of capital accumulation and the way that it's structured. White people do not think about Black people as commodities in the 1300s or 1400s. That happens when they start making Black people into commodities. And if you look at medieval European history, there's lots of examples of very, very positive representation, especially of sub-Saharan Africans. But racism has to come into existence in order to create a certain kind of structure of economic exploitation. But once that ideology is in existence, it is going to take on a life of its own. And this is part of the reason, footnote, and sorry to be so academic in this, but it's the reason why Antonio Gramsci, for me, is the most interesting European Marxist thinker, because he's always, he just says, he says that systems of thought have their own internal dynamism and their own logic. So even though it may not correspond directly to it might not be a direct ideological superstructure of the material base, the logic inside the ideological system is going to continue to produce its own outcomes. Yes, you got to get rid of capitalism, and racism is not going to magically disappear just because you do. Which means that you have to be systematically engaged in doing anti-racist work as you are also doing the work of combating capitalism. The task is not going to be finished if you just do the one or if you just do the other. And this is also an important foundational piece of the Black liberation tradition, is that these have been tethered systematically. All of the effective anti-capitalist movements, leftist movements, true leftist movements in the United States of America have actually been Black-led movements. And there's a systematic, especially these days by Black Democrats, whitewashing or capitalist washing of a lot of those liberation figures, people like Paul Robeson, people like W.E.B. Du Bois. The image that gets left of the Panthers is just armed Black men, not the most effective anti-capitalist organization ever evolved in US history, and one that, because it was using an international framework of analysis, was not capable of just bringing together different kinds of racial solidarities in the US, but then ends up inspiring multiple international movements in Algeria, in all throughout the Pacific Rim. There are Panther associated movements that rise up. This is the tradition that is most responsible for directly challenging the very fundamental basis of all of American oppression. Come get the lessons from this tradition, because they are what is needed in this moment to directly challenge the system. And we know, because it has been the most effective direct challenge to the system. To close the opening part and to now open to questions, and feel free to hit the raise hand button now, because this will take us into the second half of our conversation after I take some questions. That radical revolutionary tradition had an electoral component in every single piece of it. Which means we need to be thinking carefully about how to develop this electoral movement and to deploy carefully studied lessons from that broader tradition in order to move forward the cause of our collective liberation here in 2025. Alice, that hand is still up from earlier. I'm going to take a deep breath, sip my coffee, and wait for y'all to ask questions about the first part, and then we are going to get into the second component. Oh yeah, Pedagogy of the Oppressed is a classic. Thank you for throwing that into the chat. Alice, is your hand still up from before, or is it a question? Okay, go ahead.
I had a new one. Thank you for clarifying
Please,
that.
yeah.
Appreciate that. And thank you, by the way, just so much for this. I really appreciate you opening up this space. It's my first time here. I missed the last one, so this has been
Oh,
really
cool. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah, no, I mean,
um,
this is life-giving for me. So yeah, I
it's
appreciate
weird
it.
being in this position. I'm also a professor, so I like being on the other end of this conversation. This is nice. Um, it really got me thinking, just a comment before my question about initially when you were talking about that creative and dynamic and changing approach, not having like a cookie cutter, one size fits all, let's just look at the past and kind of press that onto the future like that's going to work. It was making me think about when you said about race and class having to be addressed at the same time and how important that is. You get a lot of comments by the left saying, no, we got to primus class and kind of leave that race stuff behind. Or I'm like, I agree with you thinking we need to be bold. It has to be done at the same time. But also then, would you agree that this is then, how do I want to phrase this question then? How much more challenging it is with the weaponization of things like identity politics, how that could be helpful. It needs to be addressed. It could be a part of the conversation, but it's almost been defanged because it's been made just this like empty void of just talking about identity without any of the class there. And I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are about being able to combat that so that we can have a meaningful conversation about those two, race and class, at the same time without, I don't know if we can even help people thinking like, oh, here we go again with that stuff, with just how much it's been beaten down through its empty, hollow uses of the weaponization and identity politics. If that question at all makes sense, that was a big old word salad.
No, the question makes all the sense in the world. The short answer to the question is that the contemporary identity politics in the 21st century are a direct mirror of much older divide and conquer strategies. They are designed to neutralize resistance and to control it within specific communities so that it can be defanged. So we have to simultaneously be attacking bourgeois identity politics. And it's weird because usually that formation goes liberal identity politics, but it's actually not liberal identity politics. It's bourgeois identity politics. And when I say that, I mean that liberals and conservatives are both part of a capitalist class structure specifically. And actually both liberals and conservatives utilize identity politics in almost identical ways. It's just that they situate themselves rhetorically on a different space with respect to identity politics, but everything that they're doing is driven by identity politics. The problem is that because a lot of especially white leftists, but this is also actually true of a lot of non-white leftists, have not done the work of actually directly confronting the problem of white supremacy in its own terms, that they are disingenuous when they try to bypass and move just to a class struggle and are unwilling to have a conversation about the fact that capitalism and race are produced simultaneously and perpetuate forms of violence upon indigenous people, upon African descended people, upon people of color more broadly, in ways that it is never practiced against working class communities. So it is a way of actually trying to avoid having an uncomfortable conversation. And the reason why it's so deadly to our collective liberation efforts is that we will absolutely carry the fundamentals of white supremacy forward with us into whatever we build on the other side of this empire if we do not pull them out. This is the reason for that other seminar that we did, Frantz Fanon and the Psychology of Oppression, because Bell Hooks was the person who framed it most directly. She said, white supremacy is not a white people's problem. White supremacy is something that is threaded through all of our institutions, through all of our cultural forms. We all have to do the work of healing from the trauma and harm of white supremacy. And one of the things that identity politics does in a bourgeois environment is that it convinces a lot of people of color that they don't have to do the work of attacking white supremacy in their own institutions, in our own ideologies, in our own structural spaces. We think that because we happen to be Black or brown, that we can't be white supremacists. Nigga, please. White supremacy needs people of color to operate as agents of white supremacy in order for white supremacy to function. So just as leftists cannot bypass doing this work, neither can communities of color bypass doing the work of striving against white supremacy in our midst and against the way that capitalism has us programmed. This is like fundamental inner work that has to be done for collective liberation. And just to kind of do a truncated summary of that piece, and we'll make sure that that link for the Fanon course goes in as well. This, in my view, is the fundamental missing piece of our past liberation efforts and our current liberation efforts, is to understand that there has to be a kind of moral and epistemological and ontological deprogramming from the internalized traumas of white supremacy and empire that happen for every last one of us. Otherwise, we are doomed to inscribe those onto our supposedly liberated society. And that's the reason why time and time again, anti-capitalist movements that have all of their socialist, boxes checked produce dramatic forms of inequality inscribed even into their supposedly socialist structures, because they did not do the independent work of fixing the problem of white supremacy. Because white supremacy is something that writes itself on your insides, not just into your material structures. And you can change the material structures, but if every person in the system still has the internalized logics, they're actually going to reproduce those internalized logics in whatever structures they occupy. So there's so much more that could be said about that. We can get more to it on day 2. Lorenzo, I had your hand next.
Hi, thank you. This has been a tremendous conversation. Referring back to the three-part strategy that you described
Yes.
from the Panthers, starting with mutual aid, community care, then direct action, and then electoral politics. I'm wondering, where do things like the No King's March fit into that? Do they fit into direct action, or are they not anywhere in that scheme?
Great question. The short answer is that they're nowhere in the scheme, but we should be figuring out a way to operationalize them nonetheless. So the first thing that I'll say about this is that No Kings does not constitute direct action for reasons that we're going to come to actually in the second part of this, which is the distinction between mobilization and organization is going to be at the heart of it. But No Kings doesn't constitute direct action because there's no demand. So one thing that I often say to people is never let anyone tell you that Martin Luther King did nonviolent protest. Martin Luther King did not do nonviolent protest. Martin Luther King did nonviolent direct action. And direct action always comes with demands. Direct action always comes with specific targeted outcomes. A boycott is direct action. A bus boycott is direct action. Sit-ins are direct action. A protest where you just get up and go, like Malcolm said, walk back and forth between the foot of one dead white man and another dead white man, that doesn't do anything because you're not demanding anything. Neither are you putting people in between the gears of the machine to keep the machine from turning over. That's what direct action is. Direct action changes an outcome and it comes with a demand. And but to return to the point, No Kings, we had a lot of volunteers that were out flyering at No Kings events or engaging at No Kings events because we understand, and we'll get to this in the second half of today's session, that a lot of people are responding to an instinctive call for mobilization because they see an injustice. but they just have absolutely no idea on how to make an effective intervention against that injustice. So part of the perversion of No Kings is that ultimately it actually comes to be a pressure release valve inside the system. It gets a lot of people to come out and feel like they're doing something when in fact they've made no direct demands. They haven't stopped anything from happening or made anything happen. And as Kwame Ture famously put it, he said the problem with nonviolent protest is that it is predicated upon your antagonist having a conscience, and America has none. So just protesting, hey, I don't like this. I don't like Trump. I don't like genocide. I don't like police brutality. You are essentially making a moral appeal to your oppressors. And they don't care that you don't like it. They just don't care. And you cannot make a moral appeal to oppressors, because if they had morality, they wouldn't be oppressors. Like that returns us to like our foundational conversation, is that there's something deeply perverse in the morality of settler colonialism, occupation, that you can't pretend that it's not there. You cannot appeal to these people. And sometimes, and this is just through garnered through long, hard experiences as a Black man, some of them get off on you protesting. They love seeing you scream and complain and knowing that they're not going to do a damn thing about it. So if you can get 10 million people to march back and forth for nothing, literally go to downtown and walk where the cops told you to walk. I've said it many times before, those are parades, not anything else. If you could get 10 million people to do that, wouldn't it be better if you could get 500,000 people to take some kind of direct action instead? And as I said earlier, the Democrats have that entirely within their power and capacity. They just have no desire to do so. They could absolutely shut down all of the contemporary resurgence of fascism, but to do so would require alienating their own donor base, and they never will. They never will do that. Lisette. Let me try this again. Go ahead, hit unmute.
Hi, Professor Ware. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Thank you.
Good. Good to see you again. By the way, I loved you on Katie's show last week, and then the werewolf collab with Brianna from a few weeks ago. Awesome. I wanted to sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying nice to see you as well, and thank you.
I wanted to touch base on what you answered in the first question, and then sort of going back to the entirety of white people having to do their work as a mixed race, non-white person. I know you said your mother is white, and having to go through talkative therapy doesn't work for me anymore. And I always have issue with having white people within our leftist spaces, because I always approach or see them with a lot of suspicion. And to be honest, when I saw the Judas and the Black Messiah, I felt a visceral sort of discomfort when he was building up the Rainbow Coalition, right?
Yeah.
And one of his cohorts reacted to the white people in the grouping with the Confederate flag, and his cohort and I had the same reaction. And he said, you don't know if he was sitting with us protesting and helping us, right? So how do you go through that, and how do you process it without, I know you're not a therapist, but how have you processed it on your own? I know you again, your mom is white, so maybe the relationship with you and white people who are on our side is a little different dynamic, but I don't have that. And so I still struggle with that and finding camaraderie with them, except the Irish people, but yep.
I mean, I listen, I've struggled with that my whole life. And this is one of the kind of principal forms of healing that I have taken through Malcolm's journey, his spiritual journey, and him transcending a space where he had essentially been programmed with hate as a response to centuries of oppression, to him reaching a place where he was still exactly the same man, but he was understanding that anybody that is able to free themselves from the prison of racial thinking is a potential ally. Now, having said that, I'm just gonna be blunt about this. Since you asked the question, I'm gonna tell the truth. My initial disposition towards any white allies is one of distrust.
Okay, me too.
White people have to earn my trust because I've been burned too many times to just go handing out trust. That's just the way that's just the way that it is. But having said that, I have also been badly burned in the past by people inside my own community that I gave the benefit of the doubt to because I expected them to think the way that I think or have a disposition similar to mine, only to be reminded that not all skin folk are kinfolk. And just because they're your people does not mean that they're your people.
Yep.
Right. And so that's the crucial part in understanding that, like, the scars of white supremacy are inscribed upon all of us, and all of us have a fundamental moral obligation to undo that work, because otherwise we're guaranteed to reproduce that work. But it's just a simple it's just a simple fact of American racism that nobody that is a thinking, conscious person of color is going to approach white people as neutral agents to be taken as at face value in their claims. If any of us that learn to do that, like, are gone by now, right? Like that those kinds of assumptions, can literally cost you your life. So it's an incredibly important part of, like, doing the work inside our own community and inside our movement, that we directly address those as fundamental realities and understand that, like, there is a different kind of substantive moral obligation for undoing the work of white supremacy for the people that have benefited from it. Yeah. That's just, like, the minimum price of admission into a circle of safety, is that you understand white privilege and that you be willing to leverage white privilege in order to strive for our collective liberation. And also that I'm just be blunt about this. I've said this in a number of different spaces. Stand up and then also take a step back. Stand up, stand with, and then take a step back. Don't always center yourself. Like, stop making this about you. And Steve Biko was the person who wrote about this most carefully in respect to the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa before he was killed by South African police. He said the problem with inclusion of white people into anti-apartheid organizations was that those anti-apartheid organizations are still in South African society, and therefore they're going to reproduce the racial hierarchies and racial dynamics of the broader society, even inside the anti-apartheid organization. So if you're not aware of that and taking positive action to correct it, then you are definitely going to reproduce those structural inequalities and all of they call them microaggressions, but they're definitely not microaggressions for those of us that experience them all the time. They're just straight up aggressions, Yeah. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Abdul.
How you doing, Dr. Ware?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Love from Detroit. I actually have two questions for you. Mayor-elect in New York. Two questions for you.
Can you do me one quick favor? Can you cut your video, just because I'm getting a lot of glitching coming from you. I don't know if other people are getting it. Okay, go ahead. All
right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, sorry about that, y'all. Two questions for you. Zohar Madani, he recently won mayor-elect in New York. One, like, do you think the socialist policies he's trying to implement is going to get passed? And then two, I know midterms 2026 is coming up. I know a lot of like different representatives are going to be trying to use those progressive socialist policies. How do we at least protect the Black community from going back to the plantation, of doing that divide and conquer tactic, the same playbook game that they use every 4 years, just with different talking points and stuff like that? How did we try to, put a stop to that and save our community? Or if it is going to be true, would those socialist policies be implemented, and how would they be implemented?
Okay, so that's a great set of questions. My first response is a definitional one. I do not consider Mamdani a socialist. Um, for me, Mamdani is, so by calling himself a democratic socialist, for me, what it is really signaling is that he's a social democrat. For me, if you look at Mamdani's policies, that he is ultimately advocating for exactly the same kind of like progressive liberal social democrat policies that Bernie Sanders was advocating for, essentially the same kinds of social democrat policies that FDR was responsible for putting forward. And just from a definitional standpoint, I don't necessarily consider those socialist. The reason is that they are lodged, especially in an overall acceptance of the overall capitalist structure and the overall imperialist structure. So Mamdani's willingness to authorize language about Venezuelan dictators, again, marks him as somebody that is accepting imperialist, framing and talking points. And for me, it situates him much more in a progressive, liberal, social democrat frame than an actual socialist frame. Now, having said that, one can make the argument that some of the policies that he's advocating for are actually socialist policies, even if you don't consider where he is, located as being an actual socialist. Do I think that he'll be able to get them through and pass them? I don't know if he'll even fight for them, much less get them passed. I don't, because I've seen him retreat on multiple fronts before even being brought into office. He issued an apology to the NYPD for calling the NYPD racist. He's made those kind of compromises with imperialism. I would not go have a meet and greet with a fascist that was responsible for explicitly white supremacist rhetoric and kidnapping people out of my state. I don't know whether Mamdani will fight for those things, but I do know that the corporate structure in both the Democrat Party and in the broader duopoly is going to fight against any efforts to pull power away from corporations and billionaires. So he's got a big fight ahead of him. And my own suspicion is that if Bernie Sanders could not break the corporate wing of the Democrats, then Mamdani definitely is not going to either. That's just my instinct, my hunch, and my suspicion. Having said that, I hope he does. I hope that he is stalwart. I hope that he fights. I hope that he is principled. I hope that he takes counsel. And I hope that everybody that's in New York that supported him applies pressure to him to be accountable for an anti-Zionist position, for an anti-police state position, for the response, for meeting the needs of ordinary working people, and for actually tackling these things, because I know that he's going to be directly under a mountain of pressure from his right. So the population has to be pushing him. And what is most concerning for me in this current moment is not Mamdani's waffling, but the way that immediately a stan culture has emerged inside the so-called left, which will excuse any slippage from him and act as though he's playing some kind of game of 4D chess, instead of just using Occam's razor and saying, nah, he's doing what people do what he's doing, what AOC did when she was put under pressure from the corporate wing of the party. He's doing what Bernie did when he was put under pressure. So, and this goes back to understanding what the Democrats are and why the Black radical tradition never drew a distinction between Democrats and Republicans. Never. If anything, Malcolm concluded that the Democrats were more dangerous. He concluded that the Liberal Party was the more dangerous of the two. So from my standpoint, our goals should be focused on organizing to combat the power structure, not to see if we think Mamdani is gonna to hold up. He ain't gonna hold up. There's only three options. He either breaks the party breaks him, or he leaves the party. That's it. Those are the options. And I don't think that there's a snowball's chance in hell that he breaks that party, which means that we're really down to two, is that he's either going to continue to slide to the right or he's just going to have to leave. And I don't see any indication that he's likely to leave. So that leaves us with the AOC probability. The harder he fights, the better it is for everybody. But there's too much history, and I just don't see it a realistic assessment. Like Einstein never said this, but it's often attributed to Einstein. Insanity is repeating the same actions and expecting a different outcome. And the last thing that I'll say on this question, and I'll just say it in this gathering. I know they're probably agents here, but we'll just say it anyway. If I were designing in a lab a political figure designed to de-radicalize the Muslim community after the Palestinian genocide and to try to get them to sign back on to the Democrat plantation, it'd be Mamdani. Do with that what you will. Yeah, Sarah. Oh, you're still muted. Go ahead. Try again.
There. Okay. Thank you for all this. Oh my God. 80 years, right after I was born, they bombed Hiroshima. Okay. So it's just everything, everything. And this issue of trust is, as a member of the campaign, this has even come up in our area. And it's like, oh, well, they're still keeping us to fight against each other. Trust is part, a lack of trust. Like, is somebody coming in the group and being paranoid and all that? So just keep in mind that there's a sense of urgency that we want to accomplish something. We want to move forward with a revolution. And sometimes you're going to have to take a chance to go with it and try to combine forces and work together to make it happen. Just yesterday, I noticed that they covered the day of mourning for the Indians, okay? There was a big group of people there. Then there's another group of people marching in Washington to get rid of Trump, and quite a huge group there. And then I noticed that there were a group of Buddhists walking halfway across the country, united, and people are gathering to be with them for peace. And it's like, it seems like so much is going on, but we're not getting together. It's like all these separate things. And how do we create solidarity, build enough trust so we can create solidarity and make something happen and get Butch into office and continue with the revolution?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. Most of it comes in what I want to use the last little bit of time to address, which is how we actually move from mobilization to organization, and the imperative for responding in that way in this moment. But I'll just respond to the piece on trust. Is that trust is established through collective struggle. It's something that is built on the basis of interactions over extended periods of time and being in the fight together, like literally being shoulder to shoulder building. It's not something that um, it's not something that anyone has a right to expect or anticipate. It's always something that has to be earned. And then once it's earned, it's something that has to be kept. And so the first thing that I said to my team when we started this campaign is that ultimately it's relationships that are going to determine our success or our failure in every instance. The way that we relate to one another, the way that we have empathy with one another, the way that we take accountability for our own actions and the way that we move in the space. Ultimately, this is the piece that is missing from the broader struggle. Those that have, I'm looking at Amina with her hand up next, those that are veterans from years of me doing spiritual intensives before I ever got called into the space of electoral politics will understand why this is so central, is that ultimately it is in the end the work of character that determines whether we rise or we fall. Our character is actually infinitely more determinative of outcomes than simple structural analysis, because who we are is going to inscribe itself into every last one of our activities. So that means that we have to like be accountable for doing the work for ourselves and never like backing up when asked to do the work. And that goes for any of us, whatever our subject positions are, because in the end, it's going to be like personal failings that are usually responsible for the failure of movements, that and operational security, frankly. And both of those things have huge components of like having to carefully cultivate and protect trust inside them. So censor that and just understand that everybody being accountable for how they move in the space is absolutely crucial to the success of those revolutionary movements. And it's the only thing that actually allows multiple streams of mobilization to become organization for common goals. It requires an incredible amount of work. Not everybody is built for that work, by the way. Like there have to be certain people whose job it is to help communicate and bridge those gaps and to be glue people. And yeah, that's the most that I can say in a short response. Go ahead, Amina. Try it again.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Peace and blessings.
Alaikum salam.
To be clear and succinct, I'll do my best. There's two prongs. One of the things I want to share is from the Amazon jungle, the Achuar people saying to a bunch of Westerner white people who came there. Similarly, I was duped. I was in this liberal white savior BS from early on, and he told these good intended white folk, humanitarian folk, John Perkins, the economic hitman, being one of them. Thank you for your intentions, but it is your dream of the modern world up there in the north that is bringing this black snake, this petroleum that's poisoning our community. Your dream over there that's demanding this violence to come here. Your paper cup, your plastic spoon that you toss and throw away is seemingly nothing to you, but to us, it's our community, it's our kids, it's poison. So, though you have good intentions coming here to help us, save us, if you truly want to help us, go back. Go back and change the dream of the modern world. And there's a lot of things with Ecuador, the Pachamama Alliance, a lot of politics there. But they came up with a personal statement to sign to bring about an environmentally sustainable, socially just, spiritually fulfilling presence on this planet. And that was a beautiful statement to me, and one that I carry with me, um, just to spotlight what it means to be in the United States or be an American in this time. Um, that our movement, actions, and our love here has this huge effect around the world as the world has on us. So that's leading to a question for this time and moment and learning from those before us. There was something that seemed to happen in the Black Lives Matter movement where leadership was decentralized and disseminated, seemingly, in comparison to the mid 20th century. So I have a concern and a fear of our dear professor climbing the ranks in the spectacle. And I want to ask on that to you, and also perhaps to the other participants, around how we continue to flatten, I guess, the work as far as mutual aid is, of the non-hierarchical approach for ourselves, which again is back to that popular education, that everyone has an experience coming to the table, and to have this, is there a guardrail for this potential idolatry or setting you up on a pedestal? And kind of with that, I will suggest the language in going forward around inviting people in, and making this movement really about each person that comes to it, and having a piece of it to offer, so that it's not simply put on to an individual like yourself. That's something I have a concern about. And I think that in the marketing and communications part of a big piece, that when I was loyal to the Democrat Party, I thought, why don't they lead more with what they have done, quote unquote, for the people, what the dream is, this vision. It's there's a lot of like good vision. Why don't do they not have a budget for marketing? And now I understand that they never cared, truly. Um, but I would love to hear more about that piece of the vision part, to circle back to that first part about changing the dream of the modern world. That's the part of that personal characteristics, which I pray that you bring that class in from Pote Imam Drame, to the wider population, around how powerful our individual actions can be, and how we are vessels to change that dream of the modern world that is ultimately bringing about the outcomes that we're living in.
It's a beautiful set of reflections and also of questions. So I'll start in no particular order with this. I made a post about this, and it probably maybe just seemed to some people like a throwaway post, but for me, it's one of the more important things that I've ever said in public. And what I said was, after we win this election, do not subject me to a cult of personality, wherein you no longer hold me accountable for living up to the ideals and expectations that I have set for myself. And that if I ever prioritize my ego or my career over our collective liberation, then I need y'all to check my black ass, is what I said. And I meant that. Like you don't understand, like the prayer that I made every single night after Dr. Jill asked me if I would run for vice president, and I agreed, was I said, Allah, spare me the humiliation of having my ego stand between the people and liberation. That as a student of history, I understand that they assassinated leaders because leaders have a capacity to galvanize movements and to bring people together, and because they communicate in a certain way that resonates. But as a student of successful revolutions, I know that successful revolutions have always survived the removal of individual leaders because successful revolutions are collective efforts. They're not the effort of a single human being. At best, a single human being can communicate core concerns and responsibilities um, across constituencies so that multiple people can hear them and relate to them and see themselves inside a broader vision. But ultimately, we are going to get ourselves free. I'm not getting anybody free. It's beyond my capacity, right? Um, we are going to have to do that work together. And that also happens like inside these spaces with everybody understanding that if we are going to do this collectively, then that puts an individual responsibility on every single person in the space to contribute whatever they can to the overall freedom struggle. Whether that is with your time, and that also means like struggling against the hardest parts for you, the part of it that makes you uncomfortable, the part of it, right? The part of it that you don't like of that work. How if y'all understood how little personal gratification I get from having to do this, you would pity me. I so much more enjoyed just teaching in a face-to-face community environment, doing online spiritual intensives, having the opportunity to interact with folks on campus. And I make a good living doing all of those things. All of this is a sacrifice from my standpoint. All of it. And I hope that I can invite like 10 more of you in to carry the load, to run for office, to take up positions of leadership, to fight those individual fights in all of the ways that are going to make us collectively successful. You know, to give of your time and of your person and of your talents in, you know, in ways that you didn't expect to have to give, that you're not quite sure that you can. Because that's what it's literally going to take in order for us to get free. But yeah, and also don't worry. Um, I promise you, like I promise you, I did the work for years and years and years before this. There will never be anything that they can offer me materially or in my ego that will be preferable to me to liberation. Never. They don't have it. They don't have anything that I want. So I won't always do this right. But if they put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, I wouldn't desist. If they offered me personally any and everything under the sun, there's nothing that they could do to get me to betray the dream of sitting with this guy in a life after this, of sitting with Malcolm in a life after this and being accepted in that gathering, of sitting with Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in the life after this and being welcome in that gathering. They don't have anything that I want more than those things. They don't. They never will. So anytime it starts to look like that, I will just go and be that same kid that grew up on syrup sandwiches and spam and remind people that I'm not anything. Nothing. But we are everything. We are everything. We have universes and worlds within us that are already written for liberation, that are already manifest in a space that's hidden from this one, but they are just on the other side of us paying the dues in sweat and tears. Dylan, try it again.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ware, for doing this. I'm going to try to keep the question brief, be mindful of your time. Since you mentioned individual leaders, I'm looking at a book on my bookshelf. The Sword and the Shield deals with Malcolm and MLK's kind of switch towards the end of their lives. So obviously, white liberals and conservatives, establishment Democrats, et cetera, love to tout the virtues of MLK and nonviolence, et cetera, et cetera. But towards the end of his life, as you probably know, he started to shift a little bit. How do you think, and I hope this isn't too off topic, how do you think he would have responded in this moment as such a large figure as you seem to not want to make yourself out to be in the way that he was.
Sorry, were you? I was reading the chat at the same time. Are you asking about King or about Malcolm?
I'm asking about King because
Yeah,
he's held in such high
that's what I
regard of
thought. Yeah.
establishment. Yeah.
I mean, so first of all, there's a great Boondocks episode on this. And I strongly encourage, people to go. It's hilarious. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious. And it's really like a meditation of a very, very clever Black humorist who also is like, Aaron McGruder is like really well steeped in a bunch of different revolutionary politics. That's why he's got Huey as a character and all of those things. So go check that out. Is very funny. I don't know the answer to the question, but I do know that King's narrative fits very firmly in the same narrative that I sketched before about Malcolm and about Fred Hampton, which is that King became most dangerous to the establishment when he transcended the so-called civil rights struggle, and it was his anti-imperialist, his anti-war element, and the fact that he was openly engaging with socialism. That's why they killed him. So and all of them enter this phase where they do all of the exact things that we started out talking about, right? That they are tethering together all of these different pieces and reaching out in as broad a possible way, and therefore drawing in new kinds of constituencies and creating new kinds of solidarity that are possible. King could have been the first Black president of the United States if he wanted to. Easily. Right? So those kind of people become very, very dangerous when they are like questioning the fundamental basis. And while we're talking about King, I've said this many times, but I'll make sure that I say it in this environment. There was an effort right after October 7th to try to claim King as a Zionist. King was not a Zionist. King was, like many people in the Black church, raised in a Zionist environment, but after the Six-Day War, King canceled a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and said he would never go until Israel gave back all of the land it took during the Six-Day War. And you have to understand what that would have meant for a Black Christian figure like King. That would have been like the crowning moment of his like spiritual and political journey, to make that kind of pilgrimage, and he would have none of it. So he had moved away from Zionism. He had moved away from the kind of contained, Black American only dimension of the struggle. And he was in many ways every bit as dangerous at the very end as Malcolm or Fred Hampton were. It just was a different expression of it. So yeah, somebody put Bayard Rustin was a hard Zionist, King was not. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time. I always start at 11 minutes after. I usually try to end at no later than 11 minutes after. And with that in mind, I'm going to do just a very, very truncated version of the setup for what we'll discuss tomorrow. So if you've got 10 more minutes, we're going to spend 4 of them listening to Kwame Ture. Then I'm going to contextualize it and set us up for tomorrow. I think maybe before I do that, though, since I did just make the call for like everybody to contribute what they can, I want to invite our fundraising director for the Butch Ware campaign to just take the mic for just a couple of minutes.
Okay, good. I was hoping you'd do that, because I was like, oh, this is a perfect segue. So, Amina, I'm really glad you asked the question you did about, our individual responsibility and our individual power, because I have the perfect opportunity for you all to contribute. So let me spend just a minute giving you a sense of where we are as a campaign right now. If you have ever seen video of Butch on stage with other candidates, it's a bloodbath, a massacre. It's fantastic. I mean, he just bodies them. And actually, was it in August, I think, at the SEIU third party debate, one of the billionaires was just getting bodied so badly he stormed out mid-debate.
Hmm.
And it's like this every time. And so, you know, both side candidates on both sides, they don't want to share the stage with him. I don't blame him. I wouldn't either. I don't even like speaking after him now, and I'm on his side. Um, but they do not want to share the stage with him. They know that right now Democrats are polling at all-time low. They know the percentage of independents nationally, the percentage of people in the country who want a third party option is soaring, and they're terrified. They know that right now he is the right candidate for the right moment, and they're afraid. And so what's happening is they're freezing him out. I mean, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, the National Union of Healthcare Workers had a forum, didn't invite him. He was frozen out, even though he's the only candidate that unequivocally supports single payer healthcare. And so we know that the messaging, you know, his campaign's message, the media is not going to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. Voters have to know that there is a candidate who's pro-worker, who's anti-genocide, who's not funded by lobbyists or corporations. And we have to, in a very grassroots way, get that messaging out. So the next step in our strategy is to purchase digital billboard space throughout the state of California. I mean, Butch is traveling up and down the state, meeting with as many people as he can, but digital billboards is a really great way for us to reach a really wide audience and just educate voters on the other options, which aren't great options, and specifically that there is a candidate like Butch, but it's not free. And I know leftists don't like to talk about money, but we can't win a campaign off of vibes. I mean, if you don't believe me, ask Holocaust Harris. She had vibes plus $1 billion and still lost the most winnable election in modern history. But I digress. And so we've set a goal to raise $25,000 to purchase the first set of billboards. And so I'm asking you today if you can pitch in whatever amount you can. That would go a long way into helping us kind of get to the first step of this next strategy. I mean, I recognize a lot of names on here, so I know I think about 25% of people who registered for this seminar gave a donation, and so we appreciate that. Some of you give regularly, give monthly as it is now, but if you haven't and if you are able, please do consider pitching in whatever amount you can. We'll put the donation link in the chat. And I don't think I have to explain this piece, but just in case, if you're thinking like, well, I'm not in California, so it doesn't pertain to me. I'm not in California either, and I work here. I'm in Texas. Can you imagine? And so, you know, the saying, as California goes, so goes the nation. This is a perfect example. If and when Butch wins this, it will be a huge step in crumbling this whole thing. I mean, it's all but over. So, you know, we can't win this by ourselves. So please, if you are able, please consider donating. If not, I think Wendy, our volunteer coordinator, is in the chat. Please consider volunteering. And even, you know, when you receive emails from us, please forward them to any kind of friends and family who may not know that there is something they can do to end this duopoly that we're in. Share on your socials, that sort of thing. If you have any questions about giving, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'll put my email address, my campaign email address in the chat. You can email me, we can talk, but please do consider what you can do to help out.
Yeah, freedom ain't free, y'all. We're fighting against mass murderers who are swimming in blood money. And the good news is that we only have to beat them once, because if we beat them in the state of California, I'm going to make campaign finance reform fundamental, ranked choice voting, proportional representation. We'll break the duopoly literally if we can get the hold of one state. We'll never have to have elections go to the highest bidder ever again, but we are going to have to be able to fight them. We don't have to spend with them. A Green candidate, Matt Gonzalez, got 47% of the vote against Gavin Newsom in 2003 and was outspent 20 or 30 to 1 by Gavin. We have a much, much greater capacity to convert donations into votes, because we are not trying to wash away decades of incompetence, corporate sell-offs, genocide, and oppression. But we do need resources to help build. And Chelsea put the fundraising email. We're only going to need probably between 15 to 20% of about 6 million votes in June. The mail-in voting starts in early May. It ends June 2nd. Only 5.5 million votes were cast in the primary back in 2022, and 17% was enough to finish second. So it's a very, very doable ask for us to get to that point, but we just need to get in front of more people. And we have been doing the work, people that, like Sarah and Connor and others that have like organized face-to-face interactions. I've been from San Diego to Humboldt and into the Valley. Somebody put that we need more man on the street conversation. I mean, I've been doing those, but we actually need to be able to pay social media editors to actually turn all of that into reels. We have literally we have hundreds of hours of footage that we can't even process. Right? Because that stuff, is like time consuming, and it's really difficult to ask all of that to be done on a volunteer basis. So volunteer your time, volunteer your resources. We're going to spend every penny just towards collective liberation. And, yes, getting on the Lefty podcast and YouTube shows helps, though, every bit of it helps. Every time we get an opportunity in the media, like with Katie Halper's show or with Brianna Joy Gray, we get new donations, new volunteers. They come in from all over the place. And I've been pretty effective in making the case that if you are interested in breaking the duopoly nationally, that intervening in California in this moment is the most effective way to do that. The more people hear that message, both throughout the country and also inside the state, the more we're going to be able to galvanize momentum. And just to be clear, we're infinitely ahead of where somebody like Zoran was, even in February of his campaign. I mean, in February of Zoran's campaign, he was polling at under 1%, and their primary was in June. He needed to get to 40 or 50% in order to have the chance to advance in that. We're going to be between 3 and 7%, just because of name recognition from the presidential. We're ahead with respect to basic name recognition, really with respect to everybody except for Swalwell and Katie Porter, or even amongst the Democrats. So we have a lot less work to do, and therefore a great opportunity, but it's going to require resources. I can answer more questions about logistics and strategy tomorrow, because we're going to have more time for that. I wanted to get one last piece into the conversation. Now it's going to be brief, but it's going to open up to where we go to tomorrow. And I'll just we'll take just 2 minutes of this. Let's see if people can see it. This is going to be the core of making the case for how we turn the Green Party into the effective revolutionary opposition that we need. And this is going to be where we're going to start tomorrow. This is Kwame Ture on the distinction between mobilization and organization.
Between mobilization and organization, because the enemy will use mobilization to demobilize us. Mobilization is very easy, very, very easy. Because since we're people who are instinctively ready to respond against acts of injustice, anytime there's one little act of injustice, we can blow it up, and we'll find people who come and make some mass demonstration around it. Miss Sally lost a job. Let's rally. She'll get her job back. People will come and rally. So-and-so got kicked out of school because the teacher's unjust. The unjust, the people who come and rally, they will come to rally at issues. And this is what mobilization does. It mobilizes people around issues. Those of us who are revolutionary are not concerned with issues. We're concerned with the system. The difference must be properly understood. The difference must be properly understood. Mobilization usually leads for reform action, not to revolutionary action. If we would look scientifically at the October 16th million and more march, we would see clearly that this was a mobilized event, not an organized event. We must know clearly the difference between mobilization and organization. One of the characteristics of mobilization is that it is temporary. Organization is permanent and eternal.
The distinction between mobilization and organization cuts to the heart of the question that we were asked earlier about the No Kings. And it is actually the foundational piece of what I understand the role of a revolutionary political party as playing in this moment, Yes, mutual aid plus direct action plus electoral politics. Yes, bringing together that configuration. But what do we do now? Right now, this party is being refashioned through this campaign into an instrument that can help channel the people's energy from mobilization around specific issues into organization against systems. You heard Kwame Ture said, revolutionaries are not concerned with issues. We're concerned with the system. And he just makes the distinction between mobilizing around issues and organizing against the system. The way that I conventionally gloss his overall approach to teaching this content is with the following words. Revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues. Revolutionaries organize against systems. The place that we begin tomorrow is by thinking through how we can apply the lessons that we study today through this lens of the distinction between mobilization and organization, and turn this campaign in this moment into the instrument that channels us from mobilizing around ICE abolition, from mobilizing around Palestinian liberation, from mobilizing against police brutality, into organizing against the system that's productive of all of them. This is also how we get out of the prison of identity politics, because often those mobilizations are siloed inside specific communities around specific issues, rather than fundamentally targeting the system that produces all of the inequalities in each of the respective issues. Malcolm said what he said. Kwame Ture said what he said. What I say is that the role of the revolutionary political party is that we channel the people's energy from mobilization around issues into organization against systems by bringing those pieces together. That means getting out on the ground and engaging with all of the people that are doing the liberation-oriented work in specific communities and starting to thread together these multiple pieces, the mutual aid, the direct action, and the electoral organizing, into a single movement. Yes, I'm gonna go on talk shows and I'm gonna catch bodies on debate stages, and I'm gonna, we'll get back on Breakfast Club, and that'll be another, chance to expose things to a mass audience. I promise you, with God as my witness and my aid, I will do my part, set the pins up, and I'll knock them down. But it's not going to be enough for us to win unless and until we are actually doing the work of working inside community to try to build resistance to the system. The next step and the next phase in this is the door knocking, the phone banking, the engaging with local organizers. The Green Party has never built block by block. That's the next part of the game plan. So come in tomorrow after everybody has done their homework, and the homework is to listen to Malcolm go through the Ballot or the Bullet speech one time. And we're going to come in tomorrow with the game plan on how to actually take this moment and build the movement that meets the moment so that we can actually get free. Because I'm not studying the history of these people because I like the history. I do. I'm a black nerd. I do like the history, but that's not why I'm studying it. I'm studying it so we can get free now. I'm studying it because the lessons are right there for us to apply the correct logic and apply the direct action and leverage in this moment. This is our chance to get the job done. If you haven't donated, donate. If you haven't volunteered, volunteer. And if you have not spoken to your immediate circle, get their asses into this meeting tomorrow. It's not too late for them to come and join this cipher. We're going to continue the face-to-face build, but there's a teaching opportunity and a movement building opportunity still on the table for tomorrow. Double the size of this room for tomorrow. I'll see y'all then.